Hey guys, we're here with the Diablo 4 Season 1 Campfire damage control video. I'm going to be going through pretty much the highlights of the video and providing a little bit of comment, some feedback on it, and we're going to take a look at what Blizzard says about this horrible, horrible failure of a season. Take a look at my previous video. I already quit. I quit. And for those of you who don't know me, I hit level 100. I was one of the first people to hit 100 on hardcore. I made it on the Lilith statue. I put in a lot of time, put in over like 700 hours into the preseason. I put a lot of time. I was there saying, hey, it's not so bad. Now we're at the point where, yes, it's very bad. Season 1 is god awful. They failed it. There is no repairing this. You could repair it, sure, but Season 1's already done. The damage is done. It's over. So we need to fix this so we can have a successful Season 2 launch. I'm not ready to call it quits on Diablo 4 just yet. Let's see if they can fix this for Season 2. Let's hear what they have to say, but I'm just going to take everything with a grain of salt because Blizzard, they've straight up lied in the past. They don't respond to anything. They go on Twitter. The only way to contact them is Twitter, and they pick and choose whether or not they're going to reply to you. Half the times they're talking about personal stuff. The other half they're talking about Blizzard, Diablo 4 related stuff. And I'm okay with the personal stuff. I get it. You're using your personal Twitter, so you have personal stuff. But what I don't get is, why isn't there an official Twitter? So some of these guys get like offended when you ask them about like Blizzard stuff, Diablo 4 stuff, when they're making a personal post. You got to understand, if you don't have an outlet, you don't have a way to receive Diablo 4 stuff on an official account, yeah, people are going to hit you up on your personal stuff. It's understanding. You guys are big figures. You have to understand that. So please, my first suggestion real quick is make a Twitter account that all of you guys have access to, and you can respond to tweets that are just Diablo 4 official stuff. You can always tag them, Joe, Adam, whoever it responded to. That's the way to do this, guys. I'm telling you, people would be a lot less heated on this topic. Anyway, let's get started here. Let's listen to the first thing.
I think,
and again, I'm going to pick spots throughout this video. There's going to be a lot of editing here. I'm going to pick specific spots that I think are important, so you guys don't have to watch an entire hour-long video for all the fluff. Let's go.
we want to, obviously acknowledge everyone's feedback in regards to reducing player power. We know it is bad. We know it is not fun, and it's something that we ourselves know that it's not the greatest play experience for players out there. We do want to explain why we ended up doing it within the actual patch, and then of course we also want to talk about like what we were trying to achieve specifically with this patch and with the changes that players ended up seeing. And then separately, we do want to also talk about how we don't plan on doing a patch like this ever again.
Okay, so real quick on that. So Adam straight up admitting it's a bad patch. It's bad. It's essentially a way to say they effed up, right? They really messed up with this patch. He's admitting it. All right, I like to hear that. I like to hear people own their mistakes and try to make right by them, right? And they said they'll never make a patch like this again. Okay, that's huge. Those are big statements to make. I appreciate you making them, but I'll believe it when I see some track record here, because it's been nothing but bad almost every patch. So I'll grain of salt with all of this. I'll believe it when I see it, but let's move on to the next important aspect or statement, I suppose, in the video. This section here is going to talk about Nightmare Dungeons. Let's hear what he has to say.
The reality is that Nightmare Dungeons are dramatically overtuned from where they actually need to be based upon the place they fill in the role they fill in the game itself. So tier 100 Nightmare Dungeons are excruciatingly difficult for most players most classes to be able to actually get through. And as a result, it begins to kind of winnow the opportunities and options that players have when they begin to engage with content at that tier, such that you really do you need to lean on very, very specific builds, very specific setups, with access to things like near instantaneous cooldowns for some skills in an effort to actually like make it through those spaces. And that was never really the intent of that content. And we see that, right? Players are using Nightmare Dungeons as ways to kind of like level up their glyphs, ways for them to gain experience and loot as they're progressing up. It's largely like a level up system that you're progressing with once you get into world tiers 3 and 4. But they've taken on an outsized role as sort of this new end-game chase opportunity for players who are looking to really challenge themselves. And we love that we want that kind of content and we want that experience for those players. And we feel like we have done a reasonably good job of that with Uber Lilith, in the game. But we don't feel that like tier 100 Nightmare Dungeons fulfill the same role at all. Just the nature of the content type doesn't actually work well as that kind of pushing opportunity. So one thing we actually plan on doing, and we'd hope to get out as part of this release, we're going to get out very, very soon, is we're making a reduction in the difficulty of some aspects of Nightmare Dungeons to kind of retune some things. And the goal here is to say that, we think that that's roughly where you are with like a Nightmare Dungeon tier 70. That's kind of where we actually want the difficulty to be for a tier 100.
Okay, all right. So what he just said there is they want to nerf Nightmare Dungeons, essentially. They want to make it so what a level 100, a tier 100 Nightmare Dungeon is right now, they want to squish it all down so the level 101 is at the difficulty of what a level 70 is right now. So a tier 70 essentially gets text edited and they put a 100 on the 70. That is your 100 now. So everything before that's going to get much easier. So they're saying Nightmare Dungeons are definitely too difficult, and they are correct. They are correct. And what he said is spot on. They definitely do require you to run a very, very specific setup, a very specific build with high survivability, high cooldown reduction, stuff like that. He's right. He is right. And I agree with this. I actually agree with that. I think the overall, and I'm all for difficult content, I think the overall like end thing shouldn't be a tier 100 dungeon. You can run a ton of them. It should be like a big event, a big like Uber Lilith, a big final boss type stuff rather than like a normal Nightmare Dungeon that's very similar to everything else we've already run. So I like that change. I think it's the right move. I will say this. I want to make a call out that's kind of, it's not on the Nightmare Dungeons, but I want to address the body language and the difference between the first Campfire Chat and this one. The first one, they were joking. They had like snacks and stuff. They were laughing. They were having a good time. The environment changed. It really did. And I truly think it's not an act. I think they do feel it. They feel the pressure. They're like upset with themselves a little bit. They're not happy with the things they've done with the patch they released. And I can see it specifically in Adam's body language on the right. The pen fidgeting, like I just picking up on little things here and there. I'm not a psychiatrist, psychologist. I don't know. I'm not an expert at reading body language, but I can see it. And
as players are going through the experience. So there's still a thing to push for, but it's more reasonable.
It's noticeable. Anyway, I feel for them. I do. They definitely messed up, but I hope they do the right things going forward because they have one more chance. For me, personally, they have one chance. They have to get this right in Season 2 or I am done. I'm done with Diablo 4. Let's move on. Sections on vulnerable damage.
And kind of see that vulnerable damage is a really outsized role that it plays in terms of a lot of build making. To the point where it feels that, you'll get to certain parts of content and creatures sort of need to be vulnerable in order for you to feel that you need to that you can damage them. This is something that we're very aware of, and we made a reduction as part of the 1.1 build that reduced player damage in general because most players rely on many builds, I should say, rely on vulnerable damage to deal to kind of spike in lots of different kinds of content. This is something we also need to talk about. Vulnerable damage is far more potent right now than we actually want it to be in general across the game. I think I've talked about this before. And we need to make a number of, we need to kind of bring these things back in line. But this is a more complicated conversation than simply just saying we can take a bonus damage to vulnerable creatures number and reduce it by 40% in terms of the amount of damage you can accrue across different sources. And have that be the way that we solve this problem. Really, I think we all know that the ultimate problem with damage to vulnerable creatures, the fact is multiplicative stacking on top of the base vulnerable damage, which is already multiplicative on its own. Like this is the reason why the stat plays such an outsized role in a lot of player builds. We're going to need to move that to an additive place, but we can't do that without making a number of other adjustments to critical strike damage, to the way that overpowered damage is both calculated and dealt to creatures, and the availability of these things across various builds. There's lots of builds that rely on vulnerable, and they're balanced around the idea that the damage is also multiplicative. So a number of their balance and tuning changes will need to be made in order to be able to bring vulnerable back in line with some of the other options we have out there. So,
all right. So prepare for a big vulnerable system change at some point. I do agree with this statement. It feels horrible when you have a build that you're like, oh, I really want this build to work, but I don't have a way to apply vulnerable with this build, so I can't really use this. That cuts you out of a lot of options, because think about your class right now. Think about the skills, your core skills and stuff. How many of them can you apply vulnerable with? And if you think, okay, maybe 2 of them I can, or just 1, the other ones are not really an option. They're really not when you get to the point where you're looking at vulnerable damage. And I had a Whirlwind Barb, level 100 Whirlwind Barb in hardcore. I'd hit an enemy, I would hit him for like 10k, and then maybe like 20k. Then vulnerable would apply, and I'd be hitting for like 200k. And that eventually changed where it was like I'm hitting for 100k, and now I'm hitting for over 1 million as the character progressed. It was just the substantial difference in damage between a non-vulnerable target versus a vulnerable target is just... it's absurd. It's so high that you need a build that revolves around vulnerable. So if you don't have a way to apply it consistently and reliably apply vulnerable to a target, you can't use that build. That's kind of how it was. They nerfed it, but obviously they nerfed everything along with it to the point where the game is just not fun. But this is good. Personally, if they remove vulnerable altogether from the game and then compensated by increasing damage in other aspects, I'd be fine with that. I'd be okay with that, because then you don't have to worry about that. It's just play the build you like to build. Maybe you want to go high crit. Maybe you increase your crit chance, you increase your crit damage, you're good to go. And every ability can crit. Every ability, not every ability can overpower though. Every ability can crit. So just use that, like now you have more freedom of builds because vulnerable's not even in the game. I'd be all for that. I don't think it's a good system at all, but I'm glad to hear that they kind of agree with that, and we'll see how it's adjusted. I'd be okay with it being kicked out of the game altogether. Let's move on. Thought this section was kind of interesting. You guys might want to hear this. Let's hear their plan, their formula for the game.
So there are four parts to this. We're going to start with the first part. We want the live game to always have a wide variety of viable builds to discover, to put together, to acquire the items for, and to optimize across all 5 of our classes. Second point, every season should introduce new items and powers that keep the game fresh and increase build variety. Moving on to the third point, the live game should also have continually evolving end game content. And that content needs to have high monster density for powerful builds to mow down, and it needs to have activities that challenge your build. And you were just talking about how while Nightmare Dungeons, I'll get to the fourth point in a second. While Nightmare Dungeons are technically challenging your build, they're challenging your build in some ways that are not very fun, right?
Yep.
Like being CC'd all the time.
Yes, that's correct. Going through 20 tiers of Nightmare Dungeons where every monster can one-shot you, and then if you get clipped by one bit of chill, you're permanently snared, right? Or not completely frozen. Like these are not things that the Nightmare Dungeons system is doing particularly well right now in terms of making challenging content.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it's so important, your call out that we plan to introduce additional content that fulfills that part of the mission statement.
That's what I was saying, that Nightmare Dungeons don't feel like the true challenge. We need to have an eventful, this is the end game boss, this is the thing I need to overcome and defeat. I need to defeat Lucifer, and Arius comes back as Lucifer or something, and he's like, true end game boss, we got to kill him. Like that's for that season. And then they keep that boss, but then there's a new end game boss that comes in. Or maybe it's Lucifer and I don't know, Lilith come back and you're fighting both of them at the same time in season 3, like something. I don't know, something to freshen it up. I understand that asking for a brand new boss every season, some people might say, oh, it's too much content you're asking for. I think it's possible. You could always reuse them, rehash them a little bit. You know how they do it. Recolor them and say, this is a new dude. You throw a couple extra abilities on him. Now there's meteors raining down during the fight, and this something to overcome a true end game goal for that season.
To challenge your builds.
Not Nightmare Dungeons.
If we can go back to the screen, I got kind of sidetracked, but I think it was really important. And of course, ultimately what we're trying to do is make the game more fun for players, right? Players are at the heart.
Ta-da! Again, I will believe it when I see it. I will believe it when I see it. And we will, I'm going to keep this going because I don't want this video to be too long, but I know there's another topic coming up that I really, really want to talk about.
Everything that we're doing. So let's go to the second point of this here. When we make changes like this, it's important for us to make them at predictable times. And Adam's going to talk a little bit more about our communication strategy here in a bit.
Just going to pause right there. I skipped their first point, but we're going to read it. So when making changes to increase build diversity, let some builds be overpowered until we have provided compelling alternatives. These meta changes will occur at predictable times, like the start of a season. Okay, I like that because if you fail at the start of a season, this season's over. If you screw up at the start of the season, Blizzard, that's it. Season 1's dead for me. I don't care about it anymore. It's gone. The race is over. Barbarians and sorcerers were absolutely destroyed, screwed over in every predictable way. We saw it coming with the patch notes. But we still launched with that, and Season 1 was an absolute catastrophic failure because of that. Take a look at the Metacritic, by the way, guys. Does not look good. This does need to happen. If you do not have an alternative in place, like, okay, I'm going to make something up here. I don't know. Let's say Cyclone and, I don't know, Mortal Strike build is really strong for barbarians. That's not even an ability in Diablo, but Mortal Strike is ridiculously overpowered. But barbs have no other build that's even close to being playable at all. So you nerf Mortal Strike build down to the ground because it's overpowered. Now we're left with what we have now. The barbarian and sorcerers, they're garbage. We nerfed everything that we thought was overpowered. Now we can't even play any build. And sorcerers and barbs are quitting or re-rolling. They have to. Druids, they're kind of the middle ground, and then obviously Necros and Rogues are just destroying the game. They're just kicking ass, and that's the reality of Season 1 right now. And this, I think, this is a key point here on what they did. They nerfed what they considered overpowered, had nothing else available to play, and now we have what we have. I'm glad they noticed this. Again, grain of salt. I'll believe it when I see it, Blizzard. I think this is something that a lot of people missed. I didn't see it posted anywhere. No one's talking about it. Listen to this.
That I wanted to really highlight on was, obviously we did this patch and we made these changes and we brought character power down, like player power down, essentially. That in itself was also supposed to be paired with these Nightmare Dungeon changes that where Joe was actually talking.
So, the Nightmare Dungeon changes we talked about just a little bit earlier in the video, how they're supposed to squish down level 100, tier 100 to then feel like what a level 70 tier is right now, to nerf Nightmare Dungeons down so they're a little bit more playable with a larger variety of builds. Apparently, that was supposed to be tied in with this patch. Those two patches supposed to be one patch, so things wouldn't feel so bad. It still feels horrible, even on your way up to Nightmare Dungeons, up to tier 3 and into Nightmare Dungeons. It feels horrible. Still, the game feels awful for barbs and sorcerers. I was watching videos of people just breezing through everything with their overpowered builds that didn't get touched. Druids are in an okay place. But for the most part, it feels horrible. So more needs to be done. But apparently this was supposed to be one patch to have the... They nerfed the players, but then there's a patch to nerf the world later. Nerf the enemies, nerf the content down. And they separated these, so we got the nerfed players one fighting the overpowered world and enemies that they planned to nerf. Those are supposed to be together. So they decided to not launch the nerfed player patch, but not the nerf the enemies patch. And that obviously hurts. It's us at our weakest state fighting them at their strongest state, fighting the enemies at the strongest state. That was bad.
Earlier, and it's something that we've learned throughout this process. Is, as you guys were talking about, that we have ultimate visions for something that is further down the line, and doing that all together at once during those moments, as opposed to doing them over time and whatnot, just leads to a better experience overall.
Yes, releasing them together as one patch would definitely be a better experience for all us players. Shocked to hear that they just learned this. I think these are guys with a lot of development under their belt. I mean, if I was in that boardroom, I'd be like, are we sure we want to nerf players now and then nerf the enemies later that we plan to do? Are we sure we want to do that? Maybe we can do a partial patch and then tell them there'll be a season 1.5, almost like mid-season thing, and we'll have a big patch there after the initial race and ladder's done, so at least it doesn't ruin the initial race. People can still play the game and have fun with their builds, and then we'll do the mid-season patch. But brings me to my next question, maybe screw all that, and how about we have a freaking PTR? This is not new. Blizzard, you've done it plenty of times. The WoW PTR is up now. I was just on it PvPing. You guys do, and for you guys that don't know what a PTR is, that's public test realm. It's we go there, we say, yeah, I want to test out what the new patch can be. We provide feedback, and now they know that everyone hates this shit before it goes live. It's not. It's a no-brainer. It's not new concept. You guys have done it before. You guys are supposed to be game development experts. Come on, we expect better, and I'm giving you one more shot. Season 2 better be good. Better launch properly. All right, let's go. Let's move on.
It's a hefty amount of patch notes. We could have digested this over a few days beforehand or a week beforehand. So one thing we do want to commit to right now is that we do plan on going forward always providing patch notes and communicating these patch notes through streams like this, through Campfire chats or developer update live streams beforehand, well beforehand, at least a week before the actual update hits.
Good. We get our patch notes a week before. We can blow them up and scream and yell about them before they go live and ruin a season's launch. Good change.
I'm going to talk a little bit about patch 111 today, just because there are some items that we are aware of that we know will be of interest to players, specifically when it comes to things that they've been asking for, and at least it gives you guys a little bit of an early preview of some stuff that's coming down the road. I think one big thing that everyone has been kind of talking about as of late from this current patch is some of the sorcerer and barbarian items and stuff like that, and how we've obviously tuned a lot of classes down, and there's questions of hey, is there any changes in the future for those two?
Yeah, we're taking a long look at a lot of the sorceress and barbarian aspects that aren't being utilized very well right now, and trying to lift a lot of those back up. So there's going to be a wide range of legendary power and unique item improvements for these two classes in particular. We're taking a look at a lot of.
I just released a video yesterday, or maybe 2 days ago by the time this goes live, about barbarians and sorcerers being the weakest in the game, and of course people, bro, you just want your class to be the most overpowered. No. Never want my class to be the most overpowered ever. I call it how it is. All right. I put in a lot of time, a lot of effort into this game. I'm telling you right now, it's Rogue, Necro at the top, Barbarian's kind of in the middle, and Barbarian and Sorceress are by far the weakest. As I said in my last video, before they even went live in this Campfire Chat, and it sounds like they agree. Those two classes are definitely the weakest. I'm glad to hear them addressing it. Let's go on and hear what they have to say.
A lot of things, but we're really honing in specifically on Sorceress first. And then also getting a lot of barbarian updates in there at the same time. And this is for 1.1.1.
Correct.
So the very next patch and cycle.
Yeah, and we expect that patch. Obviously, if we're having a live stream now, next Friday, we expect that patch here in the next couple weeks or so. Mm-hmm. So at least you guys can get an early preview on it.
Yeah, on that Friday, we'll be talking a lot about the specifics of all of those changes and kind of hearing what the community says.
Yep.
It feels like
and in fact the Nightmare Dungeon items that we were just talking about just now, that's actually we're planning on actually rolling that out in a hotfix specifically, and that is something that we actually plan on rolling out.
That means the nerfs to Nightmare Dungeons are going to be a hotfix, not a major patch. It sounds like they're not going to be in the patch that they're talking about, the 1.11 whatever it may be, for the Barbarian and Sorcerer buffs. It sounds like that's going to be beforehand and separate. So next week, they're going to have a Campfire Chat. I will be there as well. I'll do another video on that as well if you guys like this one.
Later today. So we'll have more information on the Nightmare Dungeon changes that will be that we talked about earlier that will be coming out later today via hotfix. Another big thing that we've talked about in patch notes, because we've toned it down, and now we're kind of and we had mentioned that to players that we did plan on bringing it back up. It is monster density in Nightmare Dungeons and Helltide. So I know that you guys
more
had
enemies
some plans and so forth related to that.
Yeah, so I mean, going back to the mission statement I mentioned earlier, a key part of the live game is having high density areas for players to mow down, right?
Key part of ARPGs, right?
Of which Diablo 4 is one.
That's true.
Pardon my grammar. And so we're going to be increasing the density in Nightmare Dungeons substantially. And we're going to be increasing the density in Helltide as well. Now, with the Nightmare Dungeon changes across the board for Nightmare Dungeons, all Nightmare Dungeons will get more dense. The Helltide change, there are certain areas of Helltide that are extremely dense, right?
Yeah.
Like the tar pits, for example, is very dense. Areas like that probably won't get more dense. And part of what we've been doing here at the same time in terms of these density changes is making sure that we're making performance improvements, like looking at player skills that are taking a lot of time on the servers, getting those into better performance so players have better frame rates and stuff, and fewer stalls and all these kinds of things that make the game more fun to play. And this also helps us increase the number of, like, more monsters, more players, more stuff going on. And we know that the density in Nightmare Dungeons in particular needs to go up. And so we've been...
Awesome stuff there. More enemies on the screen, make some performance changes that make it a little bit easier to play on people that might have a little bit lower systems, as well as FPS drops caused by the server. That is a thing. It's not just network connection. Trust me, it's a thing. Do a little research on that if you disagree. If you have any questions about that, let me know. Yes, your FPS can drop based off what's going on with the server. It's not just all about your computer. So this is good. This is good.
Working on that to make sure that we can accomplish that. So density in Helltide will go up, not uniformly. Density in Nightmare Dungeons will go up uniformly, and these will be substantial increases.
Okay, so every Nightmare Dungeon, we're getting our density increase, but not every section of Helltides is going to have their density increased. Good stuff. I got nothing bad to say about that. That's awesome. It always feels bad when you're running through a Nightmare Dungeon for like 20 seconds. You're like, okay, come on, where's my enemies? That's awful. It's not a good feeling. You're not getting experience in the moment. It's kind of boring. No one likes to run around doing nothing in an ARPG. It's all about that kill, 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 right? We like that. All right, let's go.
But we need more stash help now, right? And so in 1.1.1, we're going to be adding an additional stash tab for players so they can store more aspects, more Malignant Hearts.
Yeah.
Woo. It's stash tab. Let's go back a second.
For players, in 1.1.1, we're going to be adding an additional stash tab.
An additional stash tab. Like, excuse my ignorance here, but why is it so hard to be like, here's an additional 5? You, instead of starting out with 1, you start out with the 5 free. You go buy the additional ones. Like, why is that so difficult to do, like, immediately? If you can add 1, you can add 5, right? If anyone knows, if anyone says, oh, you're an idiot, this is why they can't do that, let me know in the comments. One additional stash tab is not going to do it for people. The stash tabs we have are barely enough to support 1 character. So I know they're going to be hitting up the gems at some point.
For players.
This has been like an on yet. Do we feel that we're ready to do this yet? Like the density conversation and the stash tab adjustment is possible for us. Like there's more that we're doing. You know, this is now a never-ending conversation of like what is. We're just really happy to be able to bring them in as early as 1.1.1.
Yeah. Oh, and I should mention that along with the stash tab, we're making a small change to elixir stack size. We're going to bring that up to 99.
Who has 99 of 1 elixir? I've never even gotten like over like 20 of a single elixir. But I don't know, whatever. I guess it's nice to have, right? It's just in case. But a single stash tab, that seems a little weak. Seems a little bit weak, just saying. When the gems start stacking, that's going to be nice. But I still don't think that's going to be enough. For anyone that wants to play multiple classes or all 5 classes, that's not even close. Not even close to enough. You need to quite literally like almost quadruple the amount of stash tabs we have now to support all 5 classes when you do the gem thing. So I'm talking the gem thing, plus we need like 5 times the stashes we have. Or at least 4 times the stashes we have. Something like that. For real, I'm talking 20 stash tabs. They're talking like 6. All right, moving on.
Really goes back. Joe was talking about our commitment to choice earlier, and it also, but I think it also goes back to, you know, when we say in the mission statement we want to have a wide variety of viable builds. Great, but if you can't switch between those builds, then it still feels punishing, right? So we're going to bring respec costs down by about 40%, quite a bit.
Cool. Yeah. So.
Big chunk, 40% reduction in cost. Yeah, but let's rewind again a little bit.
It still feels punishing between those wide variety of viable builds. Great, but if you can't switch between those.
Switch between builds. You know what that means to me? That means I'm going to go from Whirlwind. I'm going to try Hammer of the Ancients. It's okay. I'm going to go back to Whirlwind. You're respeccing twice. You're paying the cost twice. You're going through the process of clicking everything again. You know, the whole Paragon tree. You're going through that twice. You know what would be nice? I think I'm a genius here, right? I think I'm the first person to ever think of this. What if there's a button that's like a blank template of your Paragon tree, your skill tree, and you could like allocate points in them. And now you have your Hammer of the Ancients build, and you go, I'm gonna switch back to the other one. I'm gonna go back to my Whirlwind, and you click that, and it goes back. What if we called it like a profile or something? Like you could have profiles and switch back and forth, and there's no cost because you've unlocked the second profile tab. So now you can go back and forth, and maybe that's like something you have to earn. You have to complete Nightmare Dungeon tier 10, and you earn yourself your profile tab, or unlock World Tier 4, and you got your profile tab, or pay 500,000 gold. Maybe it's expensive, or 250, or something, whatever people think is right. Profile tab. And obviously I was joking because obviously this has been done before in games.
Builds,
so
viable builds. Great, but if you can't switch between those builds.
I like the cost reduction. I'm all for it. That does not make it easy to switch between them. It still doesn't. I still think we need something better. We need that profile tab in there. And it wouldn't be so bad to use like, here's my profile tab that I know works, and here's my I want to experiment with a new build tab on this end, and I'm going to use that to try some new things out, but at least I could still swap back to my viable build and not completely destroy it and have to save it on a website to make sure I know what it is so I can go back to it when I inevitably hate my new build. I think they can do better.
Yeah, I mean, the short version is we want to make leveling from 50 to 100 faster by adjusting XP. I don't know if you have.
Yeah, I realized when I was talking earlier about the change we made. Obviously, we also made the change to XP gain when fighting creatures above your level, and I failed to mention this discussing it.
Yeah.
So the original intent for that was we found players basically sitting at like fighting creatures like 3 levels above them and never felt like they were really challenging themselves beyond that. We wanted to stretch that out a bit further, but that went from a 25% bonus to a 15% bonus, and we knew that density changes were coming online, so we thought about this a little bit, but. I read a lot of feedback, like afterwards in particular, that just made it sound like people thought that we were just trying to make the game take longer, which wasn't actually the goal, but realized that the 25% to 15% change did constitute a nerf as a result of that. It's the thing that we're thinking about as well.
We are not trying to slow down the game.
No, and to that point, like we have a vision for how long we want the.
That's a big statement. But you can't blame players for thinking you're trying to slow down the game when you take an experience bonus that's a higher percentage and lower it. That's what it comes off as, and anyone with a brain would assume that's the goal, to slow down leveling. We did not know about your density changes. We didn't know about that stuff. So obviously, okay, maybe you found that it's still faster with the density changes because now there's more enemies, so it's okay to nerf it down because it still adds up to be more experience per hour. We didn't know.
The game take for players. we realized that it's taking a little bit longer than that, than what our vision was originally for a lot of folks that are leveling up, particularly when they get to certain parts of the game, like, when they're World Tiers 3 and 4.
Yeah.
So we are looking to like really to readjust the XP rates for those areas, because we aren't looking to like have you hit this absolute brick wall when you hit like level 70 or something, right? Like there's not like these moments where you're going to feel like you just can't, or 75. Like, we don't want you to have this feeling that you just can't make meaningful progress, that we're just artificially holding you back. That's never been the vision or the goal, right? It ended up working out that it wasn't, the players weren't as earning XP at the rate that we had originally expected, is what it really came down to. So these are...
Fair enough. So they pretty much admits that, okay, we messed up. We didn't expect it to be, kind of have this amount of impact on the leveling speed. We didn't foresee that. We messed it up a little bit. They're going to fix it?
Like, we are making changes in this regard to kind of bring this down a bit. Yeah.
And I mean, you've seen, certainly, we did things like increase the XP bonus for Nightmare Dungeons a while back quite substantially.
Yeah, and Whisper Completion, Helltide chests. Yeah.
Now, notwithstanding that, there are changes to XP related to addressing, the power leveling case, because we don't have, like, group up, have fun with your friends, like power leveling each other. The only case that we think is not very fun is the case where one person is standing at the entrance to the dungeon and the other person is having all the fun killing monsters.
Yeah, I made a video about things I said needed to change in Diablo 4, and one of the things I said was power leveling is way too impactful. You can get to level 50 in an hour, in under an hour, and it takes 10 hours at this point, 10 to 12 hours to hit level 50 now. That's a very long time to hit 50, I think, because that's kind of when builds really start to come together. You almost need the Paragon system for some builds, and that's I don't know. I think it's a shame. I think they did a little bit too much to the point where now it's impacting players that aren't even power leveling. It's impacting players that are the killer, that the person who's actually doing the killing, not the person sitting at the instance. That person's now impacted because now you reduce the amount of bonus experience by killing enemies above your level, or so many levels above you. So, bad choice.
And so, when we look at the balance of the XP changes in 1.1.0, we think that additional changes need to be made to make the game faster, especially between 50 and 100.
Yeah, we want level 1 to 100 to feel like an achievement, but not like a job.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, we want to make some adjustments to make sure that it feels fun, very achievable, obviously, within the season timeline. But yeah, so we are going to make some adjustments. We'll be talking about more probably next week.
Okay, I hit you with this though. You hit 100 really fast. That's the end of the game for a lot of people, because there's no limitless progression system in Diablo 4, which I believe Diablo 4 needs it at some point. It could be attributes, it could be randomized, it could be Paragon points, where you have a new system, and I know games have done it before. In fact, I'm not a big Diablo 3 player, but I'm pretty sure D3 has something like that, where your max level, you're still pushing a bar. Something's filling up a bar somewhere, and you're getting points for something. It could be, I'm going to come up with a random thing here. The Trinity system, where there's a triangle and you're allocating points to each section. One gives you a random attribute, one gives you a skill point, one gives you a Paragon point, and you're allocating points to them as you level, and they each start going up exponentially higher. So to get an additional Paragon point, it's easy at first, but then it goes up and up and up and up to the point where, like, now you got to play a month to try to get a single Paragon point. Like, it gets, but by the time you get to a state like that, you've already earned yourself 10 Paragon points. Something that you can still work on. And I came up with a Trinity just off the top of my head. Please don't do that. That's not a good system. But it's just a made up crap. But it's something for infinite progression. So if you make it, pretty quick, that you can get to level 100 in under 20 hours, that's not the end. We wait for a season every 3 months. A season launches, we play for 20 hours, we hit 100, we go, maybe I'll play an alt. Maybe this is the only class I really like, so I'm kind of done. There's no meat to the game at that point. There's no real substance. It's like, why make it super fast to hit 100 if there's nothing after that? Yeah, you can grind gear, but if there's no bar moving on your screen, nothing you're adding to, I think that's pretty weak for a lot of players. I think a lot of players like that. Like to have I did 5 Nightmare Dungeons. I didn't get an upgrade, but hell, I still pushed that progress bar, and I gained myself an additional point, Armageddon point, or something dumb, something like I don't know, whatever it may be. Something to instantly progress the character past level 100, so we can not kind of end our game at level 100 and say, well, we're done.
In terms of with more specificity.
I'm going to try to blow through some of the important Q&As, the questions that are good and not stupid like lore-related questions, so we'll do quick cuts here.
Experience. But that is content that we are actively in development on and are excited to try to get ready for Season 3.
There you go, leaderboard Season 3. Next. Question about Uber uniques. Will the drop rate be increased, or will we never find them?
We want players to find these, but we don't want them to expect to find these. Which is a difficult place to balance in terms of drop rates when you're thinking about these. Now, right now, I believe that they are exceedingly rare, and we do want them to feel very, very rare. But I suspect that as we start moving into future seasons, we do want to find more ways for more opportunities for players to get chances at these. And I imagine we'll be able to talk about that soon. But I would suggest that the current drop rates are probably not going to be the drop rates forever. We'll probably make those a little bit more common, a little more likely to be found as time goes on.
So there you go. Uber uniques, yeah, their drop rate right now is absurd. Might as well go play the lotto. It's absurd. So they are going to make it a little bit easier, and it's okay. And it starts becoming a little bit more acceptable as you get more things. You get rune words, you get sets into the game. More things to get rather than just the crappy yellow items that end up being the best items. That's garbage. That doesn't feel good. So I agree with him. It should be rare enough that they really they feel so rare that you don't expect to get them. But when you do, yeah, you get that excited moment. That's important. I agree that making them a little bit easier would be better, but there's a lot of probably in there, so grain of salt. This is a good one. I want to hear the whole question out because this is a good question.
Says, what is the time frame on 111? It doesn't seem very clear. Is it before the middle of the season? How long do I need to wait for Sorcerer and Barbs to have their changes and be playable? It is much sooner than mid-season. As I said, it's only a couple weeks away, and by a couple weeks I mean like very, very soon. If we're doing a stream on Friday, I would expect it within a couple days after the stream.
That's huge. The race is already over though, so that sucks. I'm glad leaderboards actually weren't in this because that would feel even more awful. I might delete a character and restart after this and say, hey, well, let's see what the barbarian changes are like, because I like giving feedback. Unfortunately, they never respond on Twitter, which sucks. It makes it feel like the 3-page post you do and any sort of feedback you give doesn't really matter. They don't view it. My channel's so small that no one gives a shit what I say, and I'll probably have 100 views on this video, but I feel like I've got a lot of experience in gaming and such, so I can call stuff out before it happens. I can see it. You can see around corners how things can turn out the way they did before the game launches. I'll say for shit's sake, which I've never said before, nerfing players when you plan to nerf dungeons again at some point, but you nerf the players first before the dungeons instead of including them in one patch. Yeah, of course that's going to cause problems. I assume someone spoke up about that over there at some point, and he was almost ignored or something, but you got to be able to see around corners. You don't have to test every little thing. Oh, we're going to nerf Whirlwind's damage by 95% and increase the cost by 10 Fury. Yeah, you can see that's going to be absolute horrible. You don't have to test that to know that's going to be unplayable. That's almost what we see here in these patch notes. It's not that severe, but it's along those lines. So it sucks. Season 1 is destroyed for me. It's garbage. It's gone. It's over. But I guess I'll test out the patch. It's going to be coming in probably maybe 2 to 4 weeks. It sounds like around there.
We have to provide some. If we say anything too specific today, production will choke us out. So we have to be very careful about the language we use. But yes, very soon.
Next question. Question about getting upgrades, specifically like the ancestral tier. Feels horrible when you're grinding constantly. You just never find an upgrade. You never get the piece you're looking for. This is a response to it.
We do have plans in Season 2 right now to have more content you can try to target farm in order to find certain unique items. And I think there's a natural extension of that to figure out what's the right way for players to be able to find an easier method of getting into some of the aspects they might be looking for as they're progressing through. So that is something that the rewards and systems teams will be thinking about and hopefully be able to talk about soon on stream.
And they also talked about adding in some UI changes that'll make it easier to compare loot. That's okay. That's kind of cool. And yeah, so a little bit of a focus on target farming and such.
And I do want to note, like, I know we have an update here coming for 1.1.1, which we just talked about is in the next couple of weeks. There are going to be other patches before season 2 and so forth, with additional changes and items that we just haven't noted, and I just want to clarify specifically on that.
Cool. So we'll be getting multiple patches before season 2. Hopefully that's enough to push the game into a playable state. Moving on. So I'm going to save you like a good 3 minutes on this question. The question was, are you going to be adjusting things like the corpse bows that just do crazy amounts of damage? Those like those undead like little like ballistas that do a lot of damage from long range, and abilities from specific abilities from enemies that just they're so much stronger than everything else you face.
We're identifying some of these like really difficult affixes, really difficult Nightmare Dungeon affixes, or like really ones that claim lots, like a disproportionate amount of player lives as part of that. And we're looking at those all at once. It's Sorcerer survivability is absolutely an issue, and we're going to be talking about it more.
So they kind of lumped in Sorcerer survivability in there. I agree that Sorcerer survivability is low. However, the Flame Shield enchantment makes up for it. It's the strongest thing in the game when it comes to survivability. I personally think that needs to be changed, removed entirely. Don't make them immortal, but make them tanky again. Make them stay alive by their own skill and their own gear choices. Right now they're really weak, so they need that enchantment. But you know what doesn't feel good? Being forced to take that enchantment. Sorcerer players, you probably hate me just from saying remove that. Hear me out. It gives you that enchantment spot back. If they remove it, you can use it for something else. You can use it for more damage, or maybe your survivability through a different method. But your character, your sorcerer, it's now like a normal character. It can stay alive. It has its survivability abilities. It doesn't get one shot by everything that you need that flame shield. That feels bad. That you essentially only have one enchantment slot because the other one must be flame shield. It's not an opinion. If you're playing hardcore and you don't have that flame shield enchantment, you're wrong. You're playing wrong. It's not an opinion. You are incorrect. You are making an incorrect build choice. And you know what? That is bad. That is bad to have a system where you are wrong if you don't take something. That should never be the thing. You're supposed to be, hey, you have some customization with your build. You don't with that enchantment slot. It has to be flame shield. If you're playing hardcore, you're playing softcore and you're okay dying all the time, go for it, do your thing. But in hardcore, it's a must-have. I think they have to remove that aspect completely. I mean, that enchantment completely, rework it so it does something completely different. Absolutely completely different. Like every enemy's within 10-yard range, they're automatically ignited and they take double dot damage if you have Flame Shield active. Something fun, something cool. Or while Flame Shield active and you use a fire ability, it does something. It does doubles all aspects on it. It does it doubles the AoE radius, it doubles the fire dot damage, it doubles the damage. Something cool, something fun. Right now it's broken. It's not good. It's bad. Moving on.
Kennywa says, question, why did you guys increase the cast time on stuff like leaving dungeons? Feels like you're trying to slow down the game by making us waste time for something that might feel useless.
We can look at that. We'll continue to evaluate that change. It's a fairly small difference. I know that in an ARPG, small amounts of time can be meaningful. We did add the reset dungeon button back in. It does require that you're outside the dungeon, and so there's kind of a loop there.
But why 2 seconds on the exit timer? I get it. It's not really impactful, I suppose, but you went out of your way to do it, to make the change. You went out of your way to be like, yeah, this 3 seconds needs to be 5. You're just like throwing random stuff at the game, though. It's just a little strange. Just a little weird for you to make the change and say, hey, we added the reset button dungeon back, so how can we make players suffer in a different aspect of the game? It's just strange. It's just a little weird.
The way that resistance damage is, or rather, the way that players use resistance to mitigate damage from certain sources. And it's going to be a far-reaching change when we actually go through and make this, which means we want to be able to take the time with it and do it properly. It's going to be, right now we plan to put that into Season 2.
There you go. Resistance changes, Season 2. I thought this was funny. This is one of my videos that was posted over a month ago. It's not something I'm really going to show, it's just something I'm going to talk about. The lack of story bosses in dungeons. When you're running Nightmare Dungeons at the end game, you fight the same bosses over and over, over and over. And the story bosses in the game, your Andariel, your Duriel, your Elias? Might get that name wrong. The guy that you fight a lot, I'll say it. I'm trying not to spoil any story stuff. The guy you fight a lot, he's not there. And generally speaking, think about the story bosses versus your dungeon bosses, like your undead dude with or the big guy with the 2 tentacle arms, the undead goat type of looking dude. Like there's even like a Carver shaman boss. Just think about them for a second, and then compare them to your Duriel, your Andariel, your Lilith. Those story bosses are a lot more fleshed out, right? They got more ability.
Campaign bosses are underutilized.
I think there could be more opportunities to fight some of those campaign bosses in the future.
That's it. Called this. This is what I said had to be done. They put so much work into these campaign bosses in there. You fight them once and you're done, or you fight them 0 times a season because you skip the campaign, you don't fight them anymore. And they're well fleshed out bosses. They're fun to fight. They're cool. Why are they not being utilized?
I can't comment further on exactly how that will look, but I agree with that sentiment.
We're gonna see them. Cool. They gotta reuse the campaign bosses in some way or another. We'll get to fight them again. Very cool. I like that.
And only 1 stack can be rolled.
More ways to craft and modify gear.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes, we do want to add more options for players to kind of modify the items they're getting. What we have really in the preseason and now the season 1 state is still very like a baseline experience in terms of item modification. We are looking at more opportunities in the future to allow players to do more with their items. So yeah.
Cool. But it's a little scary, because if we end up like Path of Exile systems where it's so overinflated and there's so many different ways to adjust a single piece of gear, it's almost hard to wrap your head around sometimes. You spend a lot of time sitting there at the stash and sitting at the crafting bench, whatever it is, just working on like a single piece of gear and reroll, put this chaos orb. I don't want that. That's what I'm looking to be different from Path of Exile. I hate their crafting system. So I do think we need a little bit more. But you got to be careful. Can't start putting in these charms that are dropping. You need them to implement into gear, and you just re-roll them. You get 1,000 of them. You keep re-rolling over and over and over for the next hour, trying to get what you want. That sucks. Don't let it get to that state. There's a question about treasure goblins, like if there'd be different varieties of them, like different ones included. Joe essentially said they'll look at that in the future. They think there's room for that to happen. And then Joe, I'm sorry, I forgot they're both named Joe. Joe Shelley, I believe his name is, in the center. He mentioned that. And then I'll call him Joe P on the left.
Designer last week talking about this. We are making we are buffing like legendary drop chance, for example, from items that will appear from treasure goblins. We do want them to be to feel a little bit more exciting when the moment they drop.
So treasure goblins gonna be getting a buff for legendaries. That is good because they seem kind of bland right now.
Awesome. Yeah.
They essentially do a recap at the end. We've heard it all. I know this video was a little bit long. If I had to include one question, my question would be, do you think it's appropriate to add a slot on the action bar for ultimates only? That would essentially free up one more spot, give us our guaranteed ultimate slot, and then we have our normal abilities. That would be my question for the dev team. Wonder what they would say, how they feel. If they responded to me on Twitter anymore, maybe I'd be able to get a response to that, but they seem to hate me now. I gotta be honest. I gotta give my honest feedback. I don't pull punches, but I'm respectful when I do it, right? So hopefully they can come around to answering my questions again, but we'll see if this video pisses them off even more. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next video. And if you like this content, let me know. I'll do something similar for the next week's Campfire Chat. Thanks for watching.